the Asatru Folk Assembly, which describes itself as being an organization that is centered around a native pre-Christian spirituality. They are moving into the lovely little community of Murdock, Minnesota. New York Times hit piece came out on January the 9th. I read through it and gave you my thoughts in hour number one, and I reached out to the fine folks at the Asatru Folk Assembly, and a gentleman by the name of Matthew Flavel got back to me, and he said, Dino, I'd love to be on your show. I'd come on anytime. So I said, well, what about Wednesday night, hour number two? And Matthew said, that sounds good to me. And without any further ado, here is Matt Flavel, one of the high priests from the Asatru Folk Assembly, on the show on this Wednesday night. Matt, how are you tonight?
I'm doing all right. Hey, thank you so much for having me on the program. It's really an honor to be here.
No. The honor is all ours, and I thank you even more so for being willing to come on because, for a couple different reasons. Obviously, I think a lot of people have some questions about this. I defended you guys vigorously in the first hour. I defended you when the story first made news back in December. And I guess the New York Times couldn't get in touch with anyone from your organization for a response in the story that appeared in the Times on January the 9th. I guess I had an easier time getting somebody to talk to me on the record from your organization than the New York Times did, because they said that phone calls to your organization and emails to your organization went unanswered. You guys wouldn't respond to some of the things that were mentioned in that story. How do you respond to that?
That's because you're not fake news, and they kind of are. We've had a lot of media attention since trying to open our Hof in Minnesota there in Murdock, and the press has treated us tremendously unfairly, and we were really hoping we'd get an outfit like this to where we have an opportunity to actually speak and address stuff, because we were very unsatisfied with the press coverage that we got.
As well, you should be. Let's clear a few things here, a few things off the checklist, okay? And you can answer either in one word, or you can further amplify your feelings. Are you a white supremacist hate group as identified by the SPLC and the ADL?
No. No to both, I guess. No to all. But yes, the SPLC has dubbed us such with no legitimate reasons whatsoever.
Has your organization, to the best of your knowledge, how long have you been with the Asatru Folk Assembly, Matt?
I've been with the Asatru Folk Assembly since 2009.
Okay. So that's 11 years. And based upon what you know, you've got different chapters spread out across the country here in the United States, and as your website indicates, different parts around the world. I asked my audience to find me all of the news clips and all the images of all of the kinds of misbehavior and law-breaking activity and white supremacist activity that your group has taken part in over the years, and I could find none. To the best of your knowledge, since you've been a part of this group since 2009, can you identify me with any kinds of articles or any instances where your organization has been involved in any kind of nefarious activities that would equate itself with something known as white supremacy?
Not once, not ever. Not only, and I think it goes without saying, but no, there's no criminality, certainly, but there's no instances of hate-filled activity, either speech or action, coming from us at all, ever. Not only to my knowledge, but just factually, it's not a thing.
One of the women that was mentioned in the New York Times piece, of which I'm sure that you read through, Matt, came from someone by the name of Maria Barron. And as it is noted in the story, she came to rural Minnesota 10 years ago, according to the story, from Mexico, so her husband could work on a nearby dairy farm. And as the story indicates, they grew to love the pastoral fields that are in Murdock, and had the kids play with other kids from Mexico and Central America and so on and so forth. And she says that now that your group is moving into town, she feels fearful for her kids, 12 and 14, and her and other women like her from the same area where they come from in Mexico or Central America have discussed taking turns watching their children play outside because your group is moving into town. What would you say to Maria Barron in response to these so-called concerns?
Well, a couple of things. First, taking it at face value. Maria, if you're listening, I am very sorry that you feel afraid. I'm very sorry that anybody in your community feels afraid. There's absolutely no cause on our end But the last thing we want to do is make anybody feel afraid or uncomfortable. To the bigger story, I don't feel that us moving into a town made Maria afraid. I think that the intentional fear-mongering of the press made Maria afraid.
Yeah.
I think that the people that hate us telling, I was going to say half-truths, but that's not even the case, telling complete fabrications about us has stoked fear. One thing I'd note, one of the reporters there early on in the story, in her own story, she admits proudly that she got a lot of people riled up about us. People weren't riled up without the press spreading fear and things that weren't true. But yeah, to the extent that Maria actually feels afraid of us, I'm confident that any amount of getting to know us would dispel that very, very quickly.
Well, one of the things I said in the first hour, Matt, was what is there to fear? I mean, what does she think? You people are going to come around and kidnap kids and hold them hostage for ransom? What is the fear? This is manufactured fear is what this is, driven by a corporate, one of the, if not the
1,000% manufactured fear. And all of the best minds of journalism can't find one incident of the Austrian Folk Assembly doing something scary or hateful or mean-spirited or doing something to anybody else, for that matter, in general.
Would it be fair to say that you guys just want to be able to practice whatever your spirituality is, your religion? We'll get into some of this with specifics in a little bit, but am I right? Because I said in the first hour, talking about you guys, Matt, I said, these people that are generating this self-hype, this fear over this group moving into town, I think I speak for them. All they want to be able to do is to practice their form of religion, whatever parameters they are, and be left alone. Am I right about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, in a way, first, that's absolutely what we want. But secondly, we'd love to be good neighbors in a good part of their community. Barring that, if we're unwanted, that's fine. But at the very least, we'd just like to be left alone to practice our faith. At most, we'd like to be able to help out with the community with any kind of charity that they're doing and, be a part of the religious community of that town. But, not where we're not wanted, I suppose. But at the very least, we'd like to be able to practice our faith in the comfort of our own facility that we purchased for it.
Gee whiz, Matt, you guys sound terrifying. You want to be good neighbors in the community? Really? Wow. I mean, I hear something like what you just said. I'm packing up my stuff and getting out of Murdock, Minnesota as quickly as I can. What is, and I assumed, by the way, that is exactly what you guys want to do. You don't want to menace. You're not there to threaten. You're not there to take over. You're not there to lord yourself over a community.
A couple of things. Obviously, it's me here talking, and I'm going to put our best foot forward, but this isn't our first facility. This is our third Hof, and a Hof is basically a temple. It's like a church where people practice house true.
Right.
This is our third. People could take a look at our other Hofs in those communities. And
wait. When you say you're third, when you say you're third in the state of Minnesota?
No. I'm sorry. Our third in the United States.
Okay.
Our third in general.
Okay. And
we have one in Brownsville, California, and we have one in Linden, North Carolina.
Okay. And how long have those Hofs, as you call them, how long have they been there? And have there been any reported incidents of violence or threats or anything associated with what they call white supremacy? Thor's Hof, which is the one in Linden, is new as of this year. Okay.
It's been in operation since July. But no, certainly not since July. There's been no problem. And then our first one, Odenshof in California, was established in 2015. And no, not one incident. As a matter of fact, people have, a similar effort was made by the press to look in and find dirt. And they called local law enforcement. They called everyone in the community. And, much to their chagrin, they couldn't find anything negative. And that's not because something's hidden. It's because we're good neighbors. You know what I found very interesting? We've had a good impact on our community.
I'm sure you have, and I'm sure you will in Murdock. But you know what I found interesting, Matt, is here this manufactured fear being generated by a publication like the New York Times. And and I noted this in the first hour, within the context of this story, here you guys are coming peaceably into town. And as you just said, you want to be good neighbors, okay? And so somebody calls the Catholic Church that is located in nearby Murdock, and they leave a message on the voicemail saying that I hope someone shoots up your church. The Reverend Jeremy Cusero, who's mentioned in the story, believes that the message was intended for you people, but they turned it over to the police nonetheless. And here you guys are coming in, completely under the radar, not making demands, not making threats, following all the laws, being good neighbors, as you say. And instead of, you guys ladling out fear to the community, somebody calls with a message that apparently is intended for you people and saying that they hope that somebody shoots up your church.
I wish that was the only incident of that. That's so far the only wrong number. Those being so angry that we're quote unquote a hate group are literally telling us how much they hate us, and very often suggesting that they or a friend of theirs ought to burn down our house with us in it.
Well,
that's been a fairly common refrain from the forces of tolerance.
And, it really kind of mirrors what goes on in the rest of society as well. Because, those that say there's no room for hate speech, whatever that is, those who say there's no room for any kind of bullying or threatening or so on and so forth, these are the same people that are involved in this stuff on a much more regular basis than the other side. So that doesn't surprise me. But what else doesn't surprise me is that I'm sure that the New York Times is aware of the fact that you guys have received consistent threats. And they have not, of course, mentioned that in their story, because that, of course, would change the entire scope of the narrative that they want to try to convince people that you guys are, this white supremacist group.
Well, one thing that I do want to mention about folks in Murdock, this has not been coming from folks in Murdock. Now, I don't know the legitimacy of Maria's fear or concern, but what we have had 100% so far as Murdock interaction have been people coming by, wishing us well, apologizing for the way we've been treated, and trying to reassure us that folks in that town are not all that way. We've had a lot of really positive interactions with our neighbors in Murdock. I feel that it seems to be the case that most of this manufactured outrage, as you put it, is not coming from Murdock itself or anybody who's had any actual interaction with us.
Which again is par for the course. Yeah. Trying, false flagging with all of these kinds of threats and calls, and all of you inside the Hof and burn it down, and all of this comes from. I would believe that. I would believe that the folks in Murdock are probably much more welcoming and much more cordial than they're painted in the story in the New York Times. Now, Matthew, I never heard of your group before. I looked over your website, and the Asatru faith. Can you kind of verbalize it for us? It certainly is not a Christian faith by what I can tell. I'm a Christian myself. It doesn't seem to be a Christian faith. But as the Times story says, and correct me if they're wrong in this, they say that you guys describe yourselves as a native pre-Christian spirituality organization. Did they have at least that right?
Yeah, I changed the verbiage just slightly, but yes, that at least fairly represents us. Unfortunately, a lot of the other articles didn't mention that. We've got a lot of people telling us, about how, referencing us and how we're not properly practicing Christianity, which the story doesn't even tell these people that we're not Christians in a lot of cases. No, that is correct. I'd describe it in a way for your listeners here. It's the worship of the native spirituality, the indigenous spirituality of European people as practiced before Christianity came. And that's expressed in many forms, but Asatru specifically recognizes the divine in the way that the Germanic peoples or the Norse peoples would. We worship Odin, Thor, Balder, Frey, those gods that folks may be familiar with it that way.
So it almost seems like a Viking faith in a lot of ways, right?
The Vikings practiced Asatru, certainly.
Okay.
But it goes back much longer than that. I'd say it goes back to the Ice Age.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. And
yes, it's the spiritual development of European peoples before outside faiths came in the conversion.
all right, and dark-skinned people aren't usually associated with being Northern European people. And so there is an exclusivity to your organization, I believe, in terms of who can become a member and, excuse me, who cannot become a member. And I've got no issue with it whatsoever. But can you go over those parameters and the reasons why? Go ahead.
Well, because we're an ethnic faith, we believe in ancestor worship, and at the furthest extension of that, we believe that our gods are our most ancient ancestors. So our way of approaching the divine is through our heritage and through our ethnicity. And it's an ethnic faith in the same way that many Native American tribes worship, in the same way I believe that Shinto practices, that a number of indigenous faiths around the world practice. We have no belief that our religion is the only religion that exists and everyone else should follow our faith. We believe that all people come from a unique religious background, and they all have their unique religion to their people, and we'd encourage them to celebrate that. I'm sure that's a beautiful and wonderful thing for them. We just want that for us.
So it'd be almost like myself or you walking into, it sounds very tribal to me, and it would be like you or me walking into a tribal place somewhere in, Africa somewhere and asking if we could be a part of their ancestral tribe. And of course, they would say to us, well, you don't look like us. You don't come from where we come from. And so, it's very difficult to kind of assimilate you into a culture and into a people and into a tribal sort of environment that you have no connection with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this a, what brought you to this faith, if I can ask? And were you spiritual prior to joining the Astral faith?
Yeah, I was. My family was never a very religious family. My immediate family certainly wasn't growing up. And I think like most white people growing up in the 1980s, your kind of default assumption of religion is Christianity. So I explored that as best I could. My aunt was a very devout Jehovah's Witness, or I say was, she is a very devout Jehovah's Witness. So I looked into that, and I got involved in that for a little bit when I got out of high school, trying to fulfill that spiritual need that I had. And I got to a point where I felt that the teachings of the Bible were really contrary to how I felt and what felt like the right thing to do. And I got to a point where I didn't want to be a hypocrite. And I read my Bible several times through and tried to make it fit, and it just didn't. And so I made the choice that if those were my options, then I would choose not to be a Christian. And then so I started thinking, I'm still a spiritual person. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. Well, what did my people have before Christianity? And I knew history and stuff, and so I kind of Googled looking around, and I thought, I was some weirdo off by myself doing this. But I found this guy, Stephen McNally, and the Alsher True Folk Assembly, and I saw that, wow, there's people just like me out there practicing this faith and worshiping these gods. This is a real thing, and so I got hooked on that. I got hooked on that in about 2001, and I spent a long time thinking and scoping it out and developing, kind of practicing on my own until I really became involved in 2009 with the Alsher True Folk Assembly.
Let's get back to the exclusivity aspect of it in terms of Northern white Europeans, and I don't think there's any question that this is why the movement, the organization, the faith, if you will, your faith, has come under such scrutiny and has seen the malicious attack against you and your people and your faith and your organization. If it was, an Alsher True faith that allowed others to join, to become part of this tribal culture, to assimilate into it, of course, if you showed the diversity and you showed the multiculturalism, even though when you think about it objectively and seriously, why would anyone want to be involved in a Northern European ancient sort of a faith that you people represent if they don't come out of that gene pool to begin with, Matt?
They don't. And I can't say that no one does, but those who want to criticize what we do always bring up those examples. We don't get applications from people that aren't us. That doesn't happen. I can't say it's never happened, but that's a manufactured scenario that's not a real case. And yeah, it's definitely targeted that way. If we were another group of people, I don't think we would just be allowed to do this. I think we'd be celebrated for doing it. And we've certainly seen that with Native American groups or with black groups or other folks that choose to take pride in their ethnicity and where they come from. And it's very unfortunate that we're not afforded that same courtesy.
Back to the story, one of the people quoted Miss Brooks, who I believe is from either the ADL or the SPLC, said that they're concerned, Matt, because your group continues to advance the desires of white nationalists to create a white ethno-state. I don't have any issue with either of those things, but I'll let you answer for yourself. Talk to that if you can. You're wanting to advance the desires of white nationalists, and you're wanting to create a white ethno-state.
That's due to some psychic behavior on their part. That's not anything we've ever said. If I feel that way, I mean, I don't have any great problem with white people having their own state, but that's certainly not some fundamental principle of Alsherjar or something that has been a huge teaching of the AFA in any way. If white nationalists like what we do, then that's great. I hope that all white people would come home to Alsherjar and enjoy what we do and what we practice. But there's certainly no huge white nationalist push by the Alsherjar Folk Assembly. We're about practicing our faith, and we currently live in the country that we live in the towns that we live in, and we have no desire to run anybody else out of town or
right.
do anything that way. We simply want our building that we purchased to have our people worshiping our gods in it. That's all.
Does your financial, monetary support, I guess, like most groups, most churches and so on and so forth, that it comes from the members itself? I mean, do you guys, the tithes and offerings, for instance, or is that what you guys are involved in to sustain operations, to have the kind of money that was made available to purchase the building in Murdock?
Yeah, we have, and we're really moving away from just a membership model. We would have a standard monthly membership fee for a long time. We've really moved towards percentage giving. We call it the Hoftoller, but yes, it's very, very similar to tithing. We have that, and then sometimes we have a targeted fundraising. There was a lot of people that raised money specifically so Baldrshof, our Hof in Minnesota, could not only be established, but we could do remodel work and get that up and running.
Where can people go if they want to look at your website?
www.runestone, runestone.org.
Okay. And speaking of that website, Runestone, according to the story again in the Times, it says activities and behaviors. You say on the website that activities and behaviors supportive of the white family should be encouraged, while those activities and behaviors destructive of the white family are to be discouraged. Now, as a white man myself, I can buy into that 1,000,000%, even though I'm not a part of your group. I don't see anything wrong with that. In fact, I think that any person, no matter their color, background, ethnicity, skin color, would subscribe to the same kind of tenets or philosophies for their own group of people as you are apparently with what is stated on your website. Yes?
Well, of course they would. If you took the word white out and you put black, Native American, any other group of people in there, everyone, myself included, would think that's a great statement and a great set of goals. As a matter of fact, we had a gentleman from the Nation of Islam, Minister Farrakhan Muhammad, reach out and say he read our website and he thought what we were trying to do was great. He wished us the best.
Take me inside, Matt, a service as best you can, depicting with words what a service in the Asa True Faith is like. I'm intrigued by this. So when do you guys meet? I mean, is there a regular meeting time? Is there a regular day? Is this kind of all over the place? Bring me into that. And what goes on? What goes on in the service?
We're pretty spread out.
Yeah.
I would love to have a day where we had a lot more membership density and we could get together once a week. But as it is now at our office, we typically get together at least once a month. Once a month for some kind of a monthly observance. Folks come and kind of hang out and fellowship and spend the day together. We often, during that time, will have different discussions, classes will lead, and just kind of spend the day enjoying each other's company. Eating's always an important part. We'll have have lunch, and usually in the evening we'll have a feast and have a real nice meal together. Our main worship practice is called bloat, and we'll get together. Typically we'll form a circle, but it depends. Sometimes, like in Murdock, the way it's set up, we'll be doing it inside. In California, we often do it outside. Gather around in a circle, and we share with our gods. So basically the idea is we're exchanging our devotion, our love, our loyalty, our energy with the gods, and assuming they accept that and appreciate it, they're bestowing their inspiration, their blessings, their strength on us. And we do this through a ceremonial sharing of a horn of mead. So we'll have a big mead horn, and we'll take it around I guess to take it back a second, we'll gather people in the circle, and then we'll speak about why we're there. We'll address the god or the goddess that we're doing our ritual to that day. We'll ask them to be present. We'll speak to them, or the Gothi who is performing the service will speak to them. And in praising and worshiping them, we'll go around, and each person will touch the horn and put their energy into the horn. If it's a small group, maybe they'll make a toast towards that god with the horn. We'll take that around the circle. We'll pour the horn out into the fire or into a receptacle and give that to the gods. And then we'll hold the horn aloft and we'll ask that the gods give us their blessing in return. And we'll take the horn around. Again, if it's a small group, everybody can have a sip of the horn as it goes around. If it's a larger group, we'll dip often an evergreen sprig in there and asperge the gathered folk in that circle and share that. That's our main worship service that we do. There's another religious practice that we often do in the evenings called sumble, and that's a ritual toasting. So we'll all sit down, usually in some kind of however we got the setup laid out in the house, and we'll go in a circle and we'll do rounds of toasting. It's usually 3 rounds. The first round will be raising the horn to one of our gods in appreciation or in celebration of that god. We'll make a toast, and we'll pass the horn around. Second round, we honor our ancestors. Now, sometimes that's our distant ancestors or some great hero, but very often that's, I raised this horn to my grandfather, and we'll tell a story about our grandfather, and we'll have a toast, and we'll go around. And then the third one's more open, and often that's celebrating a hero, maybe celebrating somebody in the room who's done something that we want to raise a toast to. It's also a time that people sometimes will recite a poem, maybe sing a song that they've composed to celebrate Asa True. And that's what a typical day at one of our hops is like.
And then I'd imagine to conclude each ceremony each day, you don robes and hoods, and you burn a few crosses on a few lawns.
They wait till I'm not there if that's what we're doing.
I tell you,
I think that if folks attended one of our services or were able to peep in and see this, they'd be very underwhelmed at all of the horrible hate crimes they think are going on, because it's really not about that. What they're more likely to see is people, crying because they're telling a story about their grandmother, or because we're doing a baby naming and there's not a dry eye in the room because we're talking about how much we love each other.
Yeah, Matt, listen, I'm so glad you came on tonight to articulate much of what you've talked about with me so far here tonight. It just goes to show you how unfortunately simple-minded people have become and how easily led astray they can become with a hit piece in the New York Times or in other, newspapers and periodicals when they read something which is manufactured and intended to generate a negative slant in the mind of the reader. And people will take their cues and make their decisions based on a bunch of misinformation without doing research on their own, without taking the time to find out the veracity of the claims that are made in not only the New York Times story, but any story in any paper, or any publication, or any online platform. You guys sound absolutely horrifying in what you do and the ways that you do it. It's not for me, but okay, fine. You sound horrifying. I can see why, based upon what you've said so far, Matt. The people of Murdock, Minnesota have got a lot to be concerned about when you guys, move in and kick all this off. Now, let me ask you, do you, when you go in and you open these, as you call them, HOFs, that's HOF, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So when you open these HOFs and you go into a community such as Murdock, will you network when you go into town? Will you pass out leaflets? Will you try to get people to come to your church or your HOF, to find out about your faith and what you guys do? Or is it a situation in which people will approach you of their own volition and then they've got to fill out an application and you've got to review it before making them an official member?
Well, it's mostly the latter, and I'm not going to say that we'll never go out and spread the word about what we do. I mean, obviously, we're proud of what we do, but we're not pushy. We don't have some kind of a door-to-door ministry to where we're I'm trying to think of the right word because I don't want to insult people that do. That's just not really the way we do things. But yeah, I'm sure that we'll talk to people about what we do because we're proud of who we are and what we do. And as far as networking in the community, we'd love to be involved in the community. We'd love to interact with and be involved with everybody in the community. But we have no desire to push ourselves or push our beliefs on anybody else.
Do you feel like, getting back to your service and the gods that you pray to, in the Nordic sense, if you will, the Viking sense, and this is something that goes way back, as you say, to the Ice Ages, your faith, if you will. On a daily basis, now I'm a Christian, and so, we always have been told to, and I think it's good that we read the Bible and we get into God's Word and we feel an intimate personal connection with God and with Jesus Christ and so on and so forth. In the same way that I do as a Christian, as a born-again believer, I might add, do you feel that sense of connectivity to these gods that you pray to, that you remember, that you pay homage to? I mean, do you feel it to the point of it being an intimate indwelling within your own being, if I can ask it like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so. And it's hard because the relationship isn't quite the same. We don't have the concept that like Odin is your personal Lord and Savior as Christians feel about Jesus. But the relationship to our gods, and more importantly, not more importantly, but more personally, the relationship with our ancestors, absolutely I feel that. And I know that with every fiber of my being to be a real thing. It's one of the coolest things when you get together at one of these, and you've been doing it a while. One of the best things that I have as a Gothi is I'm able to look in the eyes of somebody when it becomes real to them for the first time. I don't know if you run into this in Christianity, but there's a lot of people who say they believe. There's no atheists in foxholes. There's a lot of people that, inherently feel like they should believe.
Sure.
There's something really special when you see in somebody's eyes like, oh, wow, this is real. I feel this. And absolutely I have that feeling. And so do a great many of our folk.
What does your faith believe in terms of, and do you believe in, Matthew, do you believe in an afterlife? And how do you get to that afterlife? And tell me about that.
Absolutely. So how do you get to that afterlife? I suppose like most folks,
first of all,
dying.
number one, you without question believe in an afterlife.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I think that there's different options. I think in general, we don't have some great concept of a damnation situation. What most often happens with most people is they go to be with their ancestors, and they look on from beyond the veil after their descendants. that's part of a lot of our religious observance, is communing with our ancestors that are still protecting and watching over and taking care of our families, much like they did in life. And we believe strongly in that. And then for those heroes, those people who've done something great or who've had that spiritual awakening, we believe that those people can ascend and become closer to the gods. And that's often pictured at going to one of the halls of the gods. I think the most common thing is the Viking idea of when a man dies in battle, and that battle ecstasy, going to Valhalla. We believe that if you ascend and you evolve to a certain point spiritually, then you can be closer to the gods in that sense.
Is it fair for me to say that you believe, and your faith believes, that this is really, in the end, it comes down to bloodline?
Yes and no. I think that your connection to the gods through your ancestry, yes, is essential and important, because if you were of a different people, if you're black, if you're Indian, if you're whatever else, then you're not going to go to our gods. You're going to go to your gods. But I think that's where the bloodline is really important. The other thing is your bloodline, in the sense that when you pass, you go and you spend time with your ancestors, perhaps our ancestors. But I think that's a completely different and separate thing than, a completely unrelated group of people and their ancestors.
And where do you guys come down on the issue of sin? Talk to me about that. Do you believe in the concept of sin?
Well, so sin, as I understand it, in a Christian context or a Jewish context, would be falling short of the glory of God. It would be transgressing one of God's rules. Ours is a little bit different because it's much more about principles than it is about a legal violation of something. But you live nobly or you live ignobly, and there's many behaviors that are ignoble, and there's many behaviors that are noble. You can't erase the score if you've done wrong, but you can counterbalance it by doing significantly more right.
Would you... I'm listening to everything you're saying, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around this whole thing at the same time, Matt, so bear with me here. Would you object if someone referred to the Asatru faith as a pagan religion?
No, I choose not to myself, because paganism often has a lot of associations with hippie types, and that's just, we're a much more conservative group of people than that. But no, I wouldn't object to that. That's certainly not phonetically wrong.
Is your organization looking, obviously I think you're looking to grow, and is this a faith that is more common and more prevalent in other parts of the world than it is here in the United States? And if so, where is this most prevalent in the world, the Asatru faith?
I don't think so. Honestly, we've seen the rebirth of our faith, and I say the rebirth because, all of Europe was pretty much converted to Christianity, and the rebirth of Asatru took place in the late 60s and early 70s. You see most of that rebirth activity taking place in the United States. So I think in the United States is probably the most popular area for this. But we also see a lot of folks in Scandinavia practice. The country outside of the United States where we have the most membership is in Sweden.
In Sweden? Okay.
But we have members in 15 different countries.
Right. And how many members would you say of the Asatru faith are in Sweden?
Of the Asatru faith, I really could not tell you. Of the Asatru Folk Assembly, about 70.
So there's a difference between the faith and the assembly?
Yes, there's people that would say they practice Asatru that are not a member of the Asatru Folk Assembly, certainly. We believe that we are practicing Asatru correctly, and we would want all of the people who practice Asatru to join us and practice through the Asatru Folk Assembly. But yes, there's people who are Asatru who are not members of the Asatru Folk Assembly.
In the Asatru Folk Assembly, do you recognize and or believe in an entity known as Satan, or an equivalent of?
No. No. And we do absolutely believe in good and evil, in the sense that we believe in order and chaos. And there's certainly entities that we believe in that are bad, or that are, on the other team. But no, we don't have a character that equates really well to Satan.
And again, how many members confirmed in the United States right now? that you know of?
It'd be hard because I got to divide our membership.
You got a ball, just a ballpark
here and there. So
yeah,
I'd say about 650 or so in the United States.
All right, 650, and I would imagine these are people, Matthew, from all walks of life, undergoing all different kinds of occupations.
Absolutely.
So you're talking high profile positions, or things like doctors and lawyers, and right down to salespeople and truck drivers and so on and so forth.
Really across the board, we have an extreme variance as far as different types of career, successful or not successful. People that have had all kind of different experience. A lot of veterans.
Do you look at could the New York Times piece and the coverage that you're getting from the paper of record, not only in this country but in the world, even though it is extremely slanted in a negative and a malicious sort of a way that is undeserving, obviously, of your group, of your organization, of the members that are a part of it, do you believe that this could actually be a silver lining in some ways? Have you folks talked about how shining a light on what you're doing, even though it's wrong, would compel people to become aware of what you're doing, and then, if they're interested, contacting you and seeing what this is all about?
It has, and it does. Our membership is significantly up since they started the media persecutions in Murdock. I say that. It always makes us uncomfortable when we get these kind of articles, because I don't want to see our members face that kind of persecution. I don't want the threats and the scare tactics toward them, and I would never seek those out. But when we do get the attention, every time they think they're hurting us, we get a nice membership bump.
You get a little bump, yeah, because of the visibility, yeah. Have you responded on your own proactively to the Times piece, you or any of your other people in your organization, to try to, and not that they would let you, but to try to set the record straight and bring some truth into the narrative rather than the malicious slings and arrows that have come your way?
Not really, because we don't know the best way or a way to get our voice heard on it. And we certainly don't want to further the onslaught. I mean, that's certainly the reason that I jumped at coming on your program. I would love to do things where I can actually speak, and it's not, a cherry-picked, word or phrase here or there, however they want to use it. But I'd love to have opportunities in that way.
If someone goes online, Matthew, can they see an Asatru ceremony, for lack of a better word? Is there anything that people could, for instance, if I'm intrigued just because I'm intrigued and I want to go and I want to see if I can see what you guys do, is there anything online that would allow me to see that?
So, sort of, and we talked about this within the group as maybe doing some example bloats ensembles so people could see how it's done. But we don't really videotape our ceremonies because it takes something away to the sacrality of what we're doing. But what I would suggest, if you want to check it out and just see what it looks like, if you go and look us up on YouTube, our YouTube channel has got a lot of videos. They got plenty of videos of me talking, but there's also videos of kind of slideshows of our gatherings and what those look like and the kind of people that show up and kind of stuff we do. And I'd love it if people wanted to go check that out.
It's 10 minutes to the hour. It's Matthew Flavel. He's a high priest in the Asatru Folk Assembly. He's joined us on the show here this evening, here in hour number 2, to refute much of what was written in the January the 9th hit piece by the New York Times. Headline to that piece: Fear Spreads in Minnesota Town as Extremist Group Moves to Open Church. And then the subheadline says, many residents of Murdock, Minnesota said they were horrified that an organization condemned by watchdogs as a white supremacist hate group would open a church. City leaders said they had little choice but to grant a permit. It is unfortunate, is it not, Matt, that there are specific organizations out there like the ADL, like the SPLC, and others that have this power that they can wield in a cultural sense, a sphere of influence, to categorize not only your group, but whomever they want to smear in any way, shape, or form, and distribute information and trying to poison people's minds about whether it's your group or my show or this publication or that online platform, that these people have this kind of power, and they demonstrate that power all the time, to the point where the leading paper in the country did this smear piece on your organization.
Well, it is, and not that it would be okay if it was, but a lot of people don't understand the SPLC and the ADL are not government agencies. They're not accountable to any. There are private agencies that decide to engage in name calling, but that name calling is taken as the last word in who's a hate group. And
Right.
they've shown you don't have to do anything hateful for them to call you a hate group. I don't really want to encourage people to go check it out and go give them the energy. But if you look at their article on us, they don't allege that we've done or said anything hateful, but they know what we really mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not one instance. We had a reporter trying to get dirt, and he came to me frustrated because he couldn't find anything. He told me the SPLC said there was 3 things that made us a hate group. He said the first one, we believe there is a biological component to race. So does everyone. So does any forensic anthropologist. So does any doctor. That's just the thing.
Right.
Secondly, we have an archaic view of gender. I think they mean because we believe boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
Right. Right.
Apparently that's not a thing in 2021.
2 strikes against you already.
And then number 3, we spread the white nationalist propaganda of a white genocide in South Africa. Now, we could name it something different, but we do have charitable outreach to support white farmers who have been dispossessed and targeted for ethnic cleansing in that country. And people can look that up. That's not something that I made up.
No, I mean that's clearly established. In fact, I'm running something on my website right now, a story of the latest farm slaughter that went on down in South Africa. And let me say, I applaud your organization for supporting those people down in South Africa, because it obviously is what you just said. It's a white genocidal cleansing of South African white people down there, and it's a very dangerous situation. I had a guest on my show months ago who joined me from South Africa to talk about all of that. Well, those are 3 strikes clearly against you. You guys are out. So go back down, sit on the end of the bench and just take all the smearing and all of the stigmatizing that's coming your way, Matt. Now, to wrap up our conversation here, okay, I'm sure that if you or anyone in your group ever met Maria Barron, a central piece of the New York Times piece, that you would be cordial, respectful to her, to anyone in town, I would imagine. But if Maria Barron came to you, Matt, and said, Matt, I want to join the Asatru Folk Assembly, but I am a person from Central America, you would not be able to welcome her into your organization, which is your right, which is anyone's right. But what would you say if you could say something to Maria Barron, who was, quoted in that story, as you guys continue to press forward with opening up your Hof in Murdock, Minnesota? What would you say not only to Maria Barron, but to the entire community of Murdock, Minnesota?
I would ask that you judge us on our own merits and not on something that the newspaper told you you're supposed to think about us. I'd ask that you give us an opportunity. And you know what else I'd ask? When you see us there, if you have a question or a concern, come on by and have a conversation. I would love to speak to you. I know that our people there would love to speak to you. We could probably get, you may not leave agreeing with us, but you'll leave not scared of us. And I mean that. I would encourage anybody in Murdock, Minnesota that wants to stop by and say hi and address any kind of concern or fear they might have. We'd be happy to talk to you.
Matthew, I'd like to thank you for your time tonight. It's been a very interesting hour, very revealing. You've answered all of my questions. You were candid and straightforward, and I can't thank you. I wish you and your group nothing but the best moving ahead, and I'm glad that you came on board. As I said, I was able to reach your organization in ways, I guess, that the venerable newspaper, the paper of record, the New York Times, was not able to. So this has been a real pleasure talking with you, and I thank you, and I respect what you're doing.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity so much to come on your program tonight. I hope you guys have a great night.
Thank you, Matthew.